I'd like to introduce Agile Experts Executive Director and Principal Consultant, Brett Cowan.
Thanks, Lara. Hi, everybody. I hope you're all safe through these crazy times, and I hope that we can bring some very interesting information to you to help you understand potentially what might be about to happen within your own implementations, or potentially what you might gain some advice or insight into what may be already happening for you. So with that, without further ado, let's begin. I wanted to cover a couple of topics today, as promised. Firstly, around the legal, operational and business risk of a failed payroll implementation, the common challenges and complexities of payroll projects, how to assemble the right people, process and technology to ensure success, and the keys and metrics to a successful payroll project. I'll try to be as explicit as I can, because I know that when you turn up to something like this, you don't want a whole bunch of words. You want to be able to take away something you can actually do something with and try to implement yourself. So I will try to be as explicit as I can, and if you want more explicit information, please reach out and I'll be able to help you with that later on. So who am I? Why would you bother to listen to my insight into this stuff? Well, I've been working in and around payroll projects since about 2009. I first came into payroll for my sins as the UAT manager for the Queensland Health Payroll Project. Now, a lot of people would say, well, why are you telling us about that? Wasn't that a terrible disaster? Yes, it was. Though as the user acceptance test manager on that project, I saw from the position that I was in that this thing was headed for disaster, and I did everything that I possibly could to stop it. There was a subsequent inquiry, in a parliamentary inquiry, where I actually had to provide evidence as a witness for 4 hours, where I was cross-examined by any number of barristers. And the outcome of that for me was that the commissioner found that I was the lone voice of reason and that I was highly professional in what I had done. So it's not often that you get a $5 million lessons learnt done for the project that you had worked on, but this was a fantastic opportunity for me, not only to actually understand the complexity and the context of the whole project, but also the sort of things that I was doing within it and how they may have impacted the project for better or worse, thankfully in this case for the better. I have delivered project management, project coaching, assurance and test management for payroll projects within local and state governments and a whole bunch of different commercial enterprises. So whilst I don't know everything about payroll projects and I don't know everything about project management or agile or anything like that, I do have a lot of breadth of experience, and I do have some really interesting insights that I try and actually plow into our organisation as intellectual property, as IP, so that we can then learn from it and continue to improve it. So that's the source of the information that I'm going to try and bring to you today. So let me now ask you a question. What was the most successful payroll project that you know? Now, some of you may have done it yourself, but I'm thinking more about things that you've heard of, where people have said, oh my God, this was the best payroll project ever, and shouted it to the hilltops. Now, I'm going to go out without actually looking at the answers and suggest that whilst there may be some responses in there, the vast majority of what you hear about is when payroll projects go wrong, not when they go right. And the interesting thing about that is define right. Define what a successful payroll project is. And I'll give you what I understand a successful payroll project is. That the people get paid. They get paid on time at the date that they should have got paid. That is a compliant system that actually pays according to the EA or the award or whatever it is that you are entrusted to pay against. And that it has actually delivered the business value that it was intended to deliver when it was conceived as a project. What it doesn't include is, in terms of a definition of success, that it went over budget. Because over budget, yeah, sure, that's not a great thing, but it's also not the end of the world when it comes to a payroll system. Because the downside of getting it wrong is so big. Also, what's not considered a failure necessarily, or let's call it not considered a failure that is told through the ages or keeps coming back and everyone knows about it, is when the system is delivered just slightly under scope of what it was intended to do. I've never worked on a payroll system implementation that didn't have manual workarounds at the end of a go live. That's just nature of what we're delivering here. And that's not the end of the world. We need to understand that that's likely to happen and to work toward it. So my statement to you today is to say, remember the game that you're playing. It's not about necessarily having, hitting a budget is a low priority. Getting people paid correctly is actually the game that we're in. Payroll as a thing. It's the rhythm section of a company. Okay, it's that thing that is the foundation. It's the layer upon which the rest of the company is built. So you can't build a building. You can't build the Taj Mahal. You can't build the Eiffel Tower unless you have a really, really solid foundation. And in the same way, you can't build a company culture, ways of working, sales pipeline, all of these things you can't build unless you have a solid foundation. And payroll is one of the most important elements of your foundation. Because if you do not pay your people what you promised to pay them, either in terms of value or in terms of in time, you will destroy all of the other things that you've invested in. People will not trust your organization going forward. And that is the reason that you have to really value the payroll project that you are working on or maybe intending to work on, because if you get it wrong, everything else probably doesn't matter. Let's talk about the types of risks and impacts of those risks, because again, it's talking about why getting it right is so important. There's good and bad risk. Those good and bad risks lead to project impacts, and then they lead to business impacts. What's a good risk and the impact of a good risk? Well, good risks are things like when you're doing experiments, it drives innovation. And so you can do experiments. Let me just highlight here too that it's an experiment when you're not sure if it's going to fail or succeed. If you're thinking you're doing experiments and saying, hey guys, try this thing, knowing full well that it's definitely going to work, then that's not an experiment. An experiment is where you truly allow people to fail so that they can learn for themselves. And maybe they'll learn that it does work. But the point is you didn't know that it was going to work when you gave it to them or when they came up for it themselves. You need to create a place where it's safe to fail, and you plan for that failure. And you learn from experience, but keep trying new things in safe ways. Because the reason is you have all of these failures along the way, and then at one point in time, you have a success. And the key is that you make the failures and you plan. That's what the experiment's about. You plan for the failures to be a really, really small cost, so that when you have a big success, it easily eclipses the cost of all of those failures that you've had to go through along the way to get to that success. So that's good risk. That's what you really want to be doing. Project risks and issues. This is the bad risk side of things. So let's talk about, from our perspective, from Agile Experts' perspective and my personal perspective, the most common type of challenges that you'll see in a payroll project. You'll see requirements not being explicitly and fully documented in a language that the business understands. Okay? That means that it's very common in payroll that vendors or suppliers will come along and say, look, here is the structure of the requirements or the specs that I need you to document it in so that we can then go and build it, because our technology demands it to be in this way. And the problem is if you align with that, if you say, okay, I'll try and work with that, and they even let them fill it all in, and then they give it back to you and say, please sign this off. It's not in a language that you understand. It's in a different language. It's like me giving it to you in German and saying, hey, please sign this contract. It's good. And you can go into Google Translate and you can translate it into English and say, oh, seems to be about what I want. But you don't really know. The complexities in the detail, especially in payroll, you'll know that. So expect to be able to sign off your specifications in your own business language and then give it to the vendor and say, we are going to test against our language and our specifications. Please, if you need to translate it into something that's demanded for your technology, that's great. You can go ahead and do that. But that's not what we're signing off, and it's not what we're testing against. We're testing against our definitions. Bad procurement contracts. It's so common to, when we turn up to a project or a company, to look at the contract that they have signed with a vendor and to wonder, where was the thought about actually the client in this contract? You know, we work in an area which is very SaaS enabled these days. So, you know, so many of these systems aren't on-prem, they're in the cloud, which is great. The downside of that is that SaaS vendors come with SaaS contracts and say, well, this is the standard contract, please sign that. So making a view and a review of that contract a part of a deep part, a really deep part of your choice of vendor to go with, and seeing if there is a place where you can actually put some flexibility in about the things that you need, rather than just be, well, you just have to sign it, that's what it is, that's everyone signs it, just do that. That's not acceptable. You really need to make a view and a review of the contract an early part of your choice of which vendor to go with, because it makes all the difference moving forward, especially in the delivery of configurations in the services side, more so than in the actual product running and operations side. Differences between what the project understands its purpose is and what the business needs the project to deliver. Generally, all these projects start off with a purpose, and we know what we're trying to deliver. But depending on where the project is driven from, if it's driven from a different area other than the business, so the project, the PMO or something like that, resides somewhere different to the business, it's natural that there is this parting of what are we actually trying to achieve. And you need to have active maintenance of that to ensure that the two stay together. It's effectively entropy. The universe forces things to disperse and to go away from the natural path that you'd like them to follow. The universe is a crazy place. So unless you are putting effort in and trying to ensure that everything stays aligned, then it will diverge. So what the project understands its purpose is and what the business needs it to be is invariably an interesting question to ask when you walk into a project that's been running, and you'll hear very, very different things about what people think they should be doing. Incorrect tool or vendor choice. That's about, again, as I mentioned earlier, making sure you deeply understand what it is that you want and making sure that you go to market with that so you can truly understand, you can truly choose the right tool and vendor to align with what you need. Don't think so much about 10 years' time. Start with what I need tomorrow. And then from there, everything else is a nice to have. But make sure you get what you need tomorrow as front and center. We need to achieve this, because that's the thing that's going to pay people tomorrow. 10 years' time, maybe you'll need it, maybe you won't. Under-resourced project teams. Comes down to, again, remember the priority of what you're doing. Do not under-resource your team. It's just not worth it. Don't go crazy. Don't have people sitting around surfing the web all day. Fine. But when people say, hey, I need a hand, I need extra effort to do X, Y, or Z, do it. No one's ever really worried about going over budget when a payroll system pays correctly. They will crucify you if you go over budget and it pays incorrectly. But success is about correct payment. It's not about hitting an arbitrary number, which is what a budget is. Project teams which do not include all stakeholder groups and SMEs. When you're building your team, you need to recognize all of the people that are impacted by the payroll system. You know, we say payroll, sometimes it's TNA, sometimes it's payroll, sometimes it's HRIS, in the same sort of space. Okay, they're different systems, I get that, but they're in the same sort of space. And they all have all of these tentacles that go through the organization. So you need to make sure that all of the people that really need to be part of the project are actually in the project, not someone will call up. I've seen projects where, oh, look, I need to talk to someone in IT to get, you know, a server built or whatever it might have been. I'll raise a ticket. And you can imagine that's now a week gone before you even get a call back to say, hey, I see you need a server built. What do you want? You want a delay in a project and a zero value add delay? There's one right there. Get people into your project. It will do two things. It will mean that you actually have effort available to do the things in those specific areas that you need them to be done. But not just that, you'll get buy-in from those things. Those people will become your change champions in each area of the business. And then suddenly, the thing that you used to be really struggling to get support from the let's say the infrastructure team, by bringing an infrastructure person into your team, you will get that person to be your champion into the infrastructure world. And not only will they manage it all for you, they will convert the mindset of those people to help you. It's amazing when you see it happen. Inadequate and or inappropriate test approaches. Payroll's pretty special when it comes to testing. So make sure you get someone who really understands how to test payroll into your project. It will make the world of difference. Project processes which obscure visibility of actual progress and context. So this is where we start getting into the more agile style, philosophy and methodologies. Make sure that you're actually using information radiators to make sure that you're communicating to the world about the sort of things that you are doing and the sort of progress that you're making. Firstly, you'll ensure that you maintain sponsor interest. You'll make sure that everyone is behind you because you get inertia, you get flow, you get movement. People get excited by that. And that's what you need to make sure this project gets over the line. So make sure that you're getting that by showing people movement, by showing people the progress that you're making. And you will be amazed at the difference in attitude of how your project is viewed. Your project will become the one that everyone wants to work with, not that one down the back that, oh my God, they want some more things to happen. Okay, I guess I have to go and help them. That's the project that you want your payroll project to be. Lack of specific payroll project experience within the project team. Not everyone needs to be hugely experienced in payroll, but you definitely need to have a core that absolutely is to show the way, to lead the way, and to be able to show the way that it should be done. Let's look at the impacts of payroll project issues. So what happens when your project actually isn't working the way that it should? You're going to end up with non-compliance. And nobody wants that. Non-compliance is just a no-no. We all know that. So let's not even bother talking about it. You can't do it. You're going to either end up with a whole bunch of manual workarounds to achieve the compliance, which is then going to give you really high ongoing operational costs. All the reasons the business value aspect of why you're doing the project in the first place is to reduce operational costs as a general rule. It doesn't deliver the business value that it was intended to deliver. Right? That doesn't just have to be operational costs. That can be a better experience for your staff. It can be that you have better auditability. So every time audit comes in, you don't have to spend a month trying to find all of the stuff that they ask for. It's press a button, there you go. You can have everything you need. Poor acceptance by users. You roll out a new system. If it's not exponentially easier to use than the old one that they were used to, then you're going to have trouble getting uptake and getting people to want to use it. So that's definitely an impact of these project issues. You're going to get immediate staff frustration and disillusionment. And if your project goes live and that's the response that you're getting, or even worse, if that's the response that you get in your UAT, it's just not something you need to. It'll be hard for you to call your project a successful project if that's the response that people have. Limitations on integration and automation, it's going to limit what you can do going forward to build and become a more digital organization. Late delivery impacting the delivery of other projects, right? So, payroll's a fairly central sort of thing, integrates with a whole bunch of other systems. If you don't get that right and that project closed down, it's going to impact the ability of other projects to keep moving. And we talked about the concept of over budget. What does it really mean if you are over budget? Sometimes organisations treat that as a horrific thing. Other times, in my opinion, as I said, budgets are fairly arbitrary figures that you come up through estimations. But unless you've done exactly the same thing, exactly the same organisation, exactly the same people, an estimation is just an estimation, and it should be treated as that. Interestingly enough, it's like a departure time for an aircraft. A departure time for an aircraft in an airport is an estimation of when it leaves. It's not a hard and fast fact that it will definitely leave then. We treat it that way, and so when planes are late, you get upset or whatever, but the reality is it's very, very clear to anyone who's been a pilot in that space that it's an estimation. We'll do our best to achieve it, but don't hold us to it. We'll just do whatever comes up because it's a complex environment. Now let's talk about business impacts of bad risk. So that were the project impacts and sort of more low level. This is the higher level stuff. What's going to happen to your business when you don't deliver your payroll system well? You're going to have operational issues of staff dissatisfaction and increased absences. You're going to have a cultural issue of damaged internal relationships and a loss of trust. Hard to come back from that sort of stuff. You're going to have reputational issues, which is going to reduce your ability to recruit new people, and it's going to cause more people to leave. You're going to have lower staff retention. You're going to have a moral issue where you've got an obligation to pay these people. Really, you do. You promised them in their contract that they would turn up to work and you would pay them this, and suddenly you're not doing that. You're going to have business risks associated with disrupted cash flow and increased liabilities because you're holding money potentially. You're going to have legal issues, fines from the regulators and jail. In worst case scenarios, directors can be held personally liable for bad payments. You're going to have technical issues around degradation of security for the organisation and equally limitations to integration and innovation going forward. And you're going to have societal impacts, which is, financial impact on people. They're going to lose their house potentially. And if it's a big enough system, an impact actually on the economy. People are not going to want to spend money because they don't know when their next paycheck's going to arrive. So they're pretty big reasons to get it right. There aren't that many systems in an organisation that can truly say that's the risk of getting it wrong. Now that I've spent enough time to talking about why it's important to get it right, let's talk about how to get it right. People, process, technology. Let's talk about people. Point 1, bring all stakeholder groups and SMEs into the project team. I mentioned this before. You don't want to have to be reaching out and saying, please come. It's not that they're not all in there, but you need to have representative from all your different areas actually working in the team. That, as I mentioned before, that will not only mean that you have a much richer source of information to make sure everything is being done within the project appropriately, but it will also give you the change champions and the cultural shift being pushed back into those organisations very directly through those channels of communication that only those people have. You won't have that in a project that doesn't actually have all of those people represented within it. Ensure the whole team collaboratively comes up with the project plan. It's a very traditional way for the project manager to go away and say, hey, here's the best way of doing this project. Here's my plan. Okay, everybody, let's do it. And a lot of the time, whether or not they say it, the team will say, yeah, that's your plan, mate. It's not my plan. And I'll turn up to work, I'll do it. And with all the intent in the world, they didn't make the plan, they didn't buy into the plan. They're human beings. They will do the best that they can, but it stops somewhere. If you ask the team themselves to create their plan, and you can help them, you can facilitate it, but ultimately they come up with their plan, they will own it and they will then deliver on it. And you can bet your bottom dollar that they will do a much harder job of getting that thing done than they will if it's somebody else's plan. Make sure the project team has full view of the context of the project. This comes back with keeping them in mind of the purpose. Make sure that your project team always can see the purpose, and the best way that they can be reminded of that is to see the whole context of the project. Now, that doesn't work via a Gantt chart that's, 2 walls long and it's so detailed that you can't really understand all of the detail of it. You need to have this big roadmap that just shows high level, all of these chunks of things that are happening, and you can see the end date, and we're just walking through these big chunks and we can see, yes, we are definitely going to make this thing. It's crazy, but it's just so human. It's all about motivating people and making sure that they all understand what you're trying to do. Your team has the solution in their heads. You just have to create a way, an environment to help them all work together to get it out. Process. Let's talk about process. Document the change and environment management process. Make sure that you understand how you're going to get fixes in from the vendor. Make sure you understand what environment it's going to come into, how those changes get moved from one environment to the other before it may be landing in prod. Make sure that you understand how you're being informed about what those changes are, what influence you may have over that. That is such a critical component about making sure that you maintain flow. A lot of the time it's assumed. Don't allow it to be assumed. Make sure you explicitly understand that. Because in the discussion, you will come up with a whole bunch of insights that you didn't actually realize were there, assumptions. Keep the defect management process lean and focused on outcomes, not on blame. We're all in this. You, the supplier, all the team, everyone is here to get that success. Keep the context there. Everyone can see that goal. Everyone understands it. Let's keep going to that and make sure that when we see defects, we're focused on actually getting them fixed. We're not focused on, well, that was you, I gave that back to you, why haven't you fixed it? All of that sort of stuff, it achieves nothing. It achieves acrimony, and that's the last thing you want in a successful team. So what you need to do is just keep saying, look, here, what do you need from us to next time you deliver that fix that it's going to be right? Is there some misunderstanding about the requirement? Can we sit with you? What really do we need if you're really struggling to get a specific bug over the line? Most of the time, that just means people don't really understand it. And so focus on that as the source of the problem. Don't focus on the fact that they haven't delivered the fix yet or that they've delivered 5 times and it still isn't right. Keep the governance close to the project, not a layer removed. What that means is with these information radiators that I've mentioned before, make sure that that's part of your governance process, be it very directly or even just, where were we at this stage? Take a photo of the thing or take a snapshot of the thing and say, there, that's where we're at. Normally governance in the terms of the snapshotting type gates needs a bit more than that. That's fine, but try and bring directly in the artifacts from the project, because as soon as you start making interpretations on that without actually showing a clear, simple view of where it was actually at, the raw data, you got problems in actually making sure that people understand it. So make sure the raw data is simple so that everyone can still understand the raw data. If you're having to interpret all of that raw data, you probably need to look at whether you need to simplify that. Involve specialist consultants for their niches. You need consultants for interpretations. You need consultants for the legal matters in terms of the contracts. You need consultants for the assurance about where you're at within the project in that governance perspective. You need consultants with regards to IT security. All of these things, there's an ongoing list. All of these things you could possibly do yourself, but why would you? Get the consultants in, short, sharp, tell us what we need to know. Here's the solution, or here's the problem. Tell us the solution. Thanks very much. We'll call you again when we need you again. Don't scrimp on that, because it's velocity is the key to success in this context. It's not about trying to work out how could we do it. Pull someone in, present the problem. They've seen all of this before 100 times. Get them to tell you what needs to happen. Thanks a lot. Off you go. That is one of the keys to success. Not the key to success here, but it's the key to success to help you get movement. And then finally, technology, collaboration tools. A collaboration tool is what you need to make sure that everyone understands what's going on. So they have a bunch of different sorts of functionality. So when you want to follow a page and someone comes and updates it, it automatically tells you about that. It makes sure that it's easy to spread out information. It provides you these information radiators. It provides you a forum in which you can interact. You can see movement, all of that sort of stuff. Very, very important. Get the right collaboration tool. Get config and change management tools. Very, very important again. The last thing you need, especially when the pressure's on towards the end of a project, is to be wondering, didn't we have this? And where's that bug that fixed? And it seems to have lost the bug fix. Oh my God, that is the worst thing. It's so terrible for so many reasons to go backwards for no reason other than you didn't have control of what was going on. So get those things in place and early and define that process. And test management tools. Excel is not a test management tool. It really isn't. You can cobble it together and you can somehow make it work, but gosh, don't do that to yourself. Get a real test management tool because it will deliver you so much value in terms of reporting, in terms of control, all sorts of things. It's really worth it. So let's talk about the foundation for success. And I've mentioned a lot of these things along the way, but I'll just reiterate them just so that we make sure we're really clear on what it is. Collaboration across all teams. You have a minimum of 3 personas in your system. Staff or employees, the people that you're actually paying with the solution who are entering their timesheets, etc. You have the managers who are actually overseeing and controlling that, creating rosters, etc. And you have the payroll team themselves who have to use the tool in anger to actually make payments happen and calculate pay. All of those definitely, as a minimum, need to be represented in your team. I am astounded at the number of organizations that I turn up to that are running payroll projects and payroll is not in the room. I kid you not. I kid you not that payroll is an optional extra in some situations, which of course it's not. But for whatever reason, they fell off the radar. Payroll people tend not to be the most outspoken people. So, okay, they're doing their thing. They're busy. They're always busy. They've got to pay every week or whatever it is. So whatever, okay, I'll just do what I need to do to get the next payout. And that is such a mistake. Make sure they're in the room. Get your requirements and specifications right. Again, do it in your language. Don't do it in a technical language. Don't do it in a vendor's language. Do it in your language. It's worth it. One of the main reasons it's worth it is because then it's not vendor specific. You can at any point in time say, this is what we need from a business. Let's go to a different vendor. And guess what? They can still read it. They can still understand it. If you have it written in a very specific technical language for a specific technology, for a specific vendor, you pick that up and go to another vendor, they're going to say, I don't understand this. We have to just start again. Don't do that to yourself. Have a source of truth which is in your language and everything else derives from that. Testing as well as the config of the solution. Know where you are and what you do. Map business processes first. So you know where things are going to change because of the new system that's coming in. And yes, I hate to tell you, you will have to change how you work. There is not one system in the world, unless it's just a simple upgrade of the old version to the new version of the same vendor's product. There is not one system in this world that will work exactly the same to enable your teams, be it staff managers or payroll, to work in exactly the same way. So know where you are, map that out, be ready to change where necessary based on what the vendor says. Hey, yeah, these are the things that need to change. Okay, no problem. And now you've already got yourself set up for an org change management process, which says, we are very aware now of all of the changes that need to happen. Let's go. Let's actually present that to our team, make sure they understand the ADCAR model of why, etc. And then let's just go from there. Very, very important. The key to success. This is what I believe. If organizations focused on nothing else other than this, most payroll projects would work. There's a whole bunch of other things that flow behind it. That's true. But this is the one thing that if you don't have this, you are always hugely at risk of failure. And that is that a project and a successful payroll project is the same as a business. It all starts with a purpose. It starts with a why. Make sure your teams understand the why. For a project, for for a payroll project, the why is the policy, the award, the enterprise agreement, and staff satisfaction. These are the things that form the why for a payroll project. The what, so you got why leads into what, then leads into how. The what are the requirements, the things that you might put in the RFP, high-level requirements that say if someone works more than 38 hours a week, they get paid overtime. Okay, that's a great requirement. That's a what. And then the detail, the how that system that you've just bought implements that what. Press this button, do this, etc., pay this much, here's the formula, here's the interpretation, blah, blah, blah. That's the how. But you always have to start with the why. Go back to that why and make sure that everyone understands it. Because you need to keep the why in the foreground. Okay? You need to make sure that why is always paramount in people's minds, because that is what will enable your team. Everything that I've been talking about today in terms of success is about enabling your team and getting out of the way to make sure that they, A, communicate well together, they collaborate well together, that they understand the goal that you've set for them, and that everything is clear and visible, so that if and when something isn't working the way that it should, you can see it and you can help fix it. You can talk to the team, say, hey, these things don't seem to be working so well. Tell me what the problem is and tell me how you think we should fix that. Don't tell them how to fix it. It probably won't work. Ask them how that you should fix it. And when they come back potentially saying, oh, look, we're really a bit short-staffed here, don't say, well, that's the budget. Sorry, you just have to work it out. Actually listen to what they're saying. Because again, don't forget the cost of failure is so much more than the cost of actually making it successful. So I put these things in here. As ProSci ADCAR talks about the why first, and the business strategy often talks about why. Get the why out there first and everyone can follow that. There's this quote here from a guy called Graham Kenny, who's the CEO of Strategic Factors, and he had this great quote that says, to inspire your staff to do good work for you, find a way to express the organisation's impact on the lives of customers, clients, students, patients, whomever you're trying to serve. Make them feel it. It's about feeling. It's a human thing. Don't forget, all these people working for you are human beings and they will respond appropriately if given the right stimulus. And that means looking after them, making sure they can see what they're trying to achieve. Metrics. I did promise you some very explicit metrics, the things that we use when we are trying to drive a project to success. So I talked about requirements and making sure that we understand what our requirements are in our business language. That's great, but it doesn't stop there. I need to understand every single requirement where it sits in a rank-ordered list from 1 to whatever it might be. So let's say it's 200 requirements you might have for your new T&A system. Requirement, the top priority has a value of 200. The next most important priority has a value of 199 and all the way down. And no, it's a rank order. You can't have, oh, these are both equally important. No, it doesn't happen that way. One is more important than the other. Always is, always will be. And the way that you ask someone about that question is, if a system had this one but didn't have this, and a system has this one but doesn't have that, which system do you choose? Which one? And then whichever one it is, that's the higher priority, and keep going. And rank order all of your requirements. Because by doing that, it forces not only for you to have a list that helps you make a decision about which tool is the right one to go with, but it also helps you have a conversation with everyone about, in detail, these requirements. It's a great way to actually force communication to happen. And you will find all sorts of interesting assumptions and unknowns that people were unaware of at that time when you force those conversations to happen. So you've now got a list from 200 down to 1 of the requirements in rank order. And now what I want to see over the course of the project in our delivery is that how many points have we delivered in this iteration? Okay, so we're delivering with Agile, so we're going to use maybe 2-week sprints. I want to see how many value points, requirement value points, have I delivered in this iteration? If you deliver that one that was 200, you get 200 points. If you deliver 3 that are 200, 199, 188, I guess you're going to end up with, 597 points, whatever it might be. So make sure that you're tracking that, because that will tell you where you're on in terms of what path you're on in order to achieving the total number of points at the end. So if it was 100 requirements, you'd end up with about 5,000 points that you're trying to deliver over the course of the whole thing. And let me tell you, you're not going to deliver all of them. Never, 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 never. It's all about planning for having manual workarounds and making sure that you're ready to cover off the requirements in one way or another. And that's perfectly okay, because again, let's remember what the definition of success is. It's about paying people the right amount at the right time. So we deliver requirements, we understand where we're tracking, we should be able to see a trend that's going to mean that we deliver what we expected by the end. And if there's a gap there, we know what that is, and we're going to do that with manual workarounds. Awesome. Equally, what's important is to understand how many requirements we're delivering. And so if you look at this chart, the line on it is the number of requirements that we're delivering, and the bars are the point value of the requirements that we're delivering each sprint. And those two in combination allow you to see actually how the project is moving along. And if you can see that trend, you can know pretty well where you're at. And let's make this clear. This requires that vendors don't just say, look, we'll hand over an environment when we're ready, and then you can start testing. That is the highest risk, the silliest concept ever in terms of an approach. Why wouldn't we just open it up and say, look, as soon as you have something ready, give it to me, be it not the whole system, obviously, this requirement. Let's just focus on this one. Let's get this out there so we can start playing with that and saying, yeah, that looks great, or actually, no, there's still something wrong. Because sometimes you learn things from that and you go, oh my God, the fact that that worked that way means this thing over here is not going to work that way either. Oh my God. And then you can have a conversation early, not late, because that happens all of the time too. And then finally, from a team perspective, not as a management solution, but as a team thing to help them make sure that they're doing the right thing, you have what you normally call an agile perspective, a velocity chart or a capacity chart, which shows you how many points or how many, call it how much work you're doing through, how much value you're delivering each sprint. And theoretically, and hopefully, you'll see that gradually creeping up over the project as the team gets to work better and better together. So they are the metrics. And finally, I wanted to just put this out there for you. Payroll needs to work like magic, but the only way it can do that is with highly skilled magicians and with highly experienced support team behind it. And the highly skilled magicians are your payroll people, and the highly skilled support team are the team that are delivering the project and the team that are keeping the systems running throughout operations. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, and I hope you took some interesting insights away from it. Lara?
Excellent. Great presentation. Thanks, Brett. So we do have a couple of questions that have come through. So one of these questions that have come through, Brett, it says, what are some of the key red flags that your payroll project or a payroll project is at risk? How do you know if you're potentially in trouble?
That's a good question. I think that if I turn up to a payroll project and I see that people are not engaged, that I see there's a whole bunch of meetings going on where people have back-to-back meetings, I start to wonder how's anything actually moving forward, because you don't get that done in meetings. You get that done when you actually get back and are able to progress work generally on a computer of some description. And what that will tend to mean is that people are doing that outside of hours because they don't have time to do it during the day, so they do it outside of work. They're all going to get way tired. That's generally a very, very good indicator. Where you have sponsors who aren't turning up to meetings, in other words, they've kind of lost interest a bit. They've either written it off that it's just too hard and I don't really understand what's going on, so I'll just step away from it, or they're trying to mitigate risk in other ways. But equally, where people can't close things out, right? So a value of agile delivery methods and ways of working is that you absolutely see when things are closed and tested and done, and then you can go to the next thing. And if you're not seeing that stuff happen, if you're not seeing progress, if you're not seeing flow in that way, then that would be a really big red flag. I also note that if you see a person, and often it's the project manager, is completely overwhelmed, so much stuff, and they're the bottleneck. And it doesn't have to be, it could be a specific SME or anything like that, where there's one person that seems to be overwhelmed with all of this stuff. That's an indicator of two things to me normally. One is that person really knows so much and they're just so valuable, but equally, they're so overwhelmed that they're ineffective. And normally what we do in that context is to go in there and actually try and break out everything that's in their head and throw it up on a wall somewhere and say, right, let's understand what exactly is happening for you right now. And it may be in the project plan, but most of the time it's a whole bunch of things that aren't. And let's get visibility of that and let's help farm that out to other people as much as possible. And sometimes it's impossible, but then that's not a solution. You really need to force that those things get out. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. And you mentioned that understanding the why of a project is important. So say, for example, you're running a project where everyone has lost focus of the reason why for the project. What are some of the tips that you have to bring those people back into focus and understand and collect, what direction they're going in?
I think the sponsor's the key. Because ultimately the whole project is delivering to the sponsor. That person is the project's reason for being. And the sponsor's responsibility is to step up and make sure that everyone is reaffirmed as to the why. So to actually call an all-hands meeting for the project and stakeholders and say, hey, let's just go through again why this is so important to us. And to make sure that at every point that people have the ability to talk to that sponsor about it, to interact with them. And realistically, using a concept like retrospectives, where you're actually getting feedback from people that allows you to then decide on the most appropriate action, right? When you open up a safe space where people can truly say what it is that they're thinking and feeling, and then to take that information and say, right, how are we going to now solve this? And to talk to those people and to say, look, you've mentioned X or Y. Look, I'm open to hearing what you think would resolve that issue for you. And sometimes it's too late. Sometimes the people are too far gone and you say, well, okay, maybe it is time for you to move. But most of the time that isn't the case. Most of the time they're saying that because they want things to improve. So let's have that conversation and actually work it out. But in every aspect, the sponsor is the key to the why.
Excellent. All right, great. Thanks so much for that, Brett. And that's about all the time that we have for the questions today. Thanks again, obviously, to Brett and for a great presentation, and to everyone who has participated in the conversation today. As we wrap up the presentation, I'd like to encourage everyone to fill out the feedback form, which is located in the chat box to the right here. And we'd also like to point you to the Agile Experts website at www.agileexperts.com.au or follow us on any of our social channels. Thank you again for attending today's webinar and have a great day.
Thank you.